Hey everyone, I'm Chris.
And I'm Joe.
Welcome to Cross Culture Critic. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. It's October. Got through September.
It is Oktoberfest.
Yes.
I think actually in Germany, I think Oktoberfest happens in September. I think that's what I learned when I went over there.
Okay.
But over here, we think it's in October because of the name.
Yeah, and you know what? It's fitting because it feels like September still.
Yes. So all the good beers are hitting the shelves. All the good Oktoberfest, Sam Adams and Oberon, I think, and all that good stuff hits it. So yeah, good time of year. College football, jeans and sweatshirt weather.
Yes, candy. Halloween candy. I got to take my son out to go get a costume soon.
I can wear my naughty Cinderella outfit.
I don't even dress up anymore.
You know what? I haven't my entire life. The last time okay, this is going to be modified slightly. The last time I dressed up for Halloween was kindergarten.
Wow.
In kindergarten, I was Sylvester the cat. My mom sewed it. It looked perfect. It looked spot on. And I remember as a kindergartner, I would just be like, I would hate walking up to houses. I'd be like, I feel like a dork doing this. So basically what my family did, my sister felt the same way. So what we would do is every Halloween night, we'd if it started at say 7 o'clock at night, my dad would come home. We would go out to eat as a family. We would go to Toys R Us. Me and my sister could each pick out a toy, and then we'd go home and we'd pass out candy
Really?
to whoever was still left. Oh my gosh, I almost just poked myself in the face. Pass out candy to whoever was there. But that was our night. We had dinner at some awesome place, and then we would get a toy. And I loved that. And then as an adult, last year was the first year since being a kindergartner. Last year was the first year that I dressed up
As Sexy Cinderella.
And I can't remember what I was, it's coming back to me. I was the Cat in the Hat.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I wore, all black and had the mitten things and the big hat. And so I was Cat in the Hat, and then my daughters were Thing 1 and Thing 2.
Oh, that's
and
funny.
So last year was the first year, and I had fun. So I think this year I've kind of been one of those guys where I'm like, oh, what am I going to be for this year? Not going all out. I don't decorate the yard or anything like that. But for Zoo-Boo, for those of you that don't live around here, we have this thing at the Detroit Zoo called Zoo-Boo, and you walk through the zoo at night, and they have it all lit up, and they pass out candy and stuff. So basically my Halloween costume is for Zoo-Boo. A friend of mine, Keith Beringa, does a dress-up party, and so I go to that, and I think maybe another costume party somewhere else, and that's about it for me.
Yeah, when we got a house, my first thought was, I can't wait to decorate for Halloween. And then I did it for 1 year, and I was like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
I'm like, why am I putting this stuff out?
Yeah.
Like, it's for one night. It's not like Christmas, where it's like festive and nostalgic. I'm like, I'm just spending $70 on these cheap little
black and orange lights.
Yeah, these little tombstones that get knocked over every morning. My wife likes to dress up. I usually just have like a go-to like mullet wig or something like that.
Right.
Then it is fun to take my kids out. I like taking them for trick-or-treating. They have fun with it. But yeah. So Halloween season is in session. So welcome to the show. We are going to talk jobs today. And so I wanted to start off with an icebreaker that's kind of related to that. I want to know, what was your first job? Did you have jobs in high school or anything? Or?
Yes, there was the first job I had, and then there was like my first official job.
Okay.
The first job I ever had is I painted dolls.
Whoa.
Yeah. My mom was a manager of an art studio, and the artist whose shop she managed made these amazing dolls.
Okay.
And so what they would do is they would make all the pieces for the dolls, all the arms and legs and stuff like that. And then in the summertime, I would just spend all day long, 8 hours a day, watching the Summer Olympics and just painting the base coat on all these.
Okay, so you weren't like making the faces.
No, I was just the base coat. So if like one was like a frog, I would just paint the green, and do that. put all the pieces aside, and then she would come back later, and the artist would assemble the doll and then paint the actual, like, her artistic ability, would take over and do all the details and everything. I was just a base coat painter. So that was like my first job that I ever had. But it was just like in the summer, stuff like that. Then following that, the first like real job where it was, weekly and throughout the year was at a supermarket called Oak Ridge Market in Royal Oak.
Oak Ridge, yes.
Yeah, it was at Crooks and Webster, which is now a Planet Fitness.
Okay.
Just opened up the Planet Fitness. But yeah, I was there at the grocery store. I was a bag boy, so I bagged groceries and went out and brought in the carts. And I met a bunch of friends that I'm still friends with to this day. One of my best friends in the world, Cal Cagno. People here in the Detroit area may know him. He used to be the morning guy on 89X. And so me and Cal have been friends forever. Lots of friends. Lindsay Urich, a friend of mine that we stay in contact even now on Facebook. And she survived the last big hurricane that went through Florida. She survived that, so I hope she got a T-shirt that says I survived the Hurricane Irma or whatever. But yeah, tons of friends that I'm still friends with to this day from that grocery store.
Okay, wow. That had to be like, what, 20 years ago? More than that.
I was a freshman, so 1992.
Oh, wow. Wow, almost 30 years ago. Sorry
almost
to make you feel
30
old,
years ago, yeah.
Oh, wow. Mine was not as fun. My uncle owned a pizza place in Warren. I don't know if you're familiar with anything on the east side. There's a place called Cloverleaf Pizza.
Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorites.
Well, hold on.
You're like, not that one. The one next door that Cloverleaf put out of business.
No, there was a Cloverleaf. There's still a Cloverleaf Pizza on Gratiot and like 8 Mile. And great pizza.
Absolutely.
For a while, my uncle owned a franchise of them at 12 and Hoover.
Really?
Yeah. And
what was that?
It was Cloverleaf.
It was still Cloverleaf.
It was Cloverleaf, and it was smaller. It wasn't like the big bar.
I used to live at 10 in Hoover.
Okay, I used to live at Frazo and Gratiot.
I lived 11 years at 10 in Hoover.
Okay,
right by the hospital.
Yeah. I used to go to church at 11 in Hoover, the big Redeemer Baptist. It's one side of Warren now.
Yeah.
But anyways, he owned a.
My grandfather built that church.
Really?
Yeah.
It got struck by lightning twice, so I don't know if he
He was. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything.
Put some voodoo on it.
Right.
My uncle owned a small franchise of it in this little strip mall, 12 in Hoover, and it had like a small dining room, and then it was carry out and delivery and stuff, and I was a dishwasher.
Okay.
So I turned 15, and basically my mom said, "You're getting a job.
Yeah.
And your uncle needs a dishwasher, so you're going to go work for your uncle for like $4 an hour."
Okay.
I hated it. It was just not a great first exposure to work, because you start off when you're young and you get your first job, you have to work weekends all the time, nights and weekends, and it builds character. But so I'd be working till like 11 or 12 at night on the weekends because people would stay. And then as a dishwasher, you're there till the very end.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a dishwashing machine. So we had, the 3 sinks with like soapy water, rinsey water, and bleach. And you would just, on a rush night, you would have like 3 carts piled up with dirty dishes. You're scrubbing them off till, all hours of the night. You go home, you smell like bleach and grease. There was one night I stayed all night cleaning glasses. And I got in the next morning, and the other manager had discovered the glasses had spots on them, so left them out for me to wash again as soon as I came in. Lord. And it was just, I'm sure now if my son had that job, I'd tell him suck it up and deal with it.
Yeah, but for $4 an hour.
For $4, I did threaten to quit at one point because I wanted off to go to a concert. Jeff Moore in the Distance.
Oh.
I did not get it off, and so I threatened to quit. I still did not get it off, and my parents told me I should go talk to my uncle. But he felt so bad, he did buy a dishwashing machine and give me a $1 raise to keep me on board. So, but it was just one of those places where I was a gawky, youth group kid, so I didn't talk to a lot of people. I remember this girl, she swore all the time, and so one of the managers, one of the younger managers, he'd be like, "Hey, do you think she's cute?" And I can't believe this. I'm like, No, because she's got a dirty mouth. And I was just like, there are so many times I would go back and like kick my own butt. But yeah, it sucked unless you got to make a pizza. That was always fun, like making the pizza or making my own to take home. But yeah, I went right from there too to like be a concessionist at a movie theater, and that job was even worse. Like,
oh, really? See,
yeah.
I would think that you would like that.
I thought I would too, but it was at the AMC Abbey 8.
Okay.
14 in John R. It's not there anymore. It's a computer place now.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Computer warehouse. And I did that my senior year of high school after the restaurant closed down. And that was worse. That was, you stayed late. You were there on the weekends till 1 or 2 in the morning, watching other people go have fun. You get butter all over you from the machine. You got pop sprayed all over you. I still was a nerd, so I didn't talk to anyone there. And yeah, that was a suck job. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of great jobs, but I had the money in high school.
How many jobs have you had?
Oh gosh. Okay, well I did the pizza place. Then while I was working there, I got a job after school for a few hours as a mailroom clerk. Pizza place closed down, so then I got the job at the Abbey, and I worked there for I think just over a summer there. And then when I started college, I got a job at Sam's Club at 14 and John R. Used to be there. And I actually liked working at Sam's Club. Like, that was fun. I did about 3 years there. And, you got to lift stuff all day. I got in actually decent shape. I got paid time off for the first time in my life.
Oh, that's always nice.
Yeah, so that was good. It was fun. And then I went and worked 4 years at Verizon in a call center, which is the absolute worst job in the world.
I don't think that, yeah.
And by then I was out of college and... yeah, started the career, which we'll talk about in a minute. How about you?
I painted the dolls. Then I went to a grocery store. From the grocery store, I quit and, I resigned from the grocery store because my buddy Cal got me a job at a factory for $10 an hour. So I went from like $5.50 or $5.75 at the grocery store to $10 an hour working at the factory. So I resigned from the grocery store, worked 1 day at the factory, and it was literally like the chocolate candy episode of Laverne or of I Love Lucy.
Oh.
And so it was like all this stuff coming down a conveyor belt. I had to put all these rolls of basically cellophane into boxes and then slide them down a thing, walk over a catwalk, put all the boxes on a pallet, and then wrap it with the cellophane. But the whole time I'm stacking them, there's still the rolls coming down that I should be over there putting them in the box. It was ridiculous. It was like the job of 3 people that I had to do by myself one day. And I lasted 1 day, and 6 hours into my day, I think I had 2 hours left, I was like sick to my stomach. You're working by all these huge machines that are, running at 120 degrees. I walked into my supervisor's office, and this is the God's honest truth, people. I walked in and I said, sir, you're not going to see me tomorrow. I won't be back. I don't want to do this job anymore.
Give me my money.
And he goes, you know what, Joe? He goes, I walked in this place 20 years ago and started working just like you. And he goes, on my first day, I wanted to quit as well. And I'm thinking, here comes the speech. God's honest truth, this is what he said. He goes, 20 years ago, I wanted to quit on my first day too, but I didn't, and I stayed. And look at me now, my life sucks.
Oh, no.
God's honest truth, that's what he said to me.
Wow.
He goes, you leave this place, you don't ever look back, and you go on to bigger and better things. And I was like, thank you, sir, I will. And so that was it. I finished out my last 2 hours, and I got the freak out of there, never went back. Went back to the grocery store. Was at the grocery store for a little while, I think just a couple of weeks, and they heard that I was looking to bounce yet again, and they were like, we're just not going to be a stopgap for you. So they fired me. And I started working for a landscaping company, and I did that for a little bit while the insiders were getting going. And then, that was right after graduation. So the summer after graduation, I did landscaping, and then that was about the time the insiders started taking off. Did the insiders. When that ended, I worked for the Salvation Army as a youth pastor / community center director. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I went on to my current job.
All right. Well, we're going to get into that a little bit too. I would say, the rock star thing. Was that kind of a dream job? I would have to imagine that there was a point where you're like, I can't believe I get to do this.
Yeah, there definitely is. Like, I was that kid growing up that when I remember in like 86 when like License to Ill came out, like we would listen, me and my buddies would listen to that, and then like we would lip sync it, and just like I would play like the broom, the broom bass. And, we would all have these, like, different positions. We'd lip-sync this stuff. And when I was in my room, I was, constantly lip-syncing to songs and pretending like I was a rock star. And then, but I was never in any choirs. I was never in anything where I was singing. The first time I, like, got up and sang in front of people was with the Insiders.
Yeah.
And it was a ton of fun. But it's the type of thing that, like, I talk to people, or people now talk to me about it. And they're like, do you miss it? And I'm like, no. The best thing, and I think on the interview, we touched on it a little bit. The best thing about the Insiders is like when you're 18 years old and you've been in Michigan all your life, and you did a couple summers, you went camping in Canada, and once I flew to Arizona, to be with my, with my grandma. Other than that, never been out of Michigan. So here I am, 18 years old. You're in a van with all your buddies, and you're just experiencing the entire country on your own, and you don't have your parents, to help you out or bail you out if you get into a pickle. Like, you have to problem solve, and okay, we're in the middle of the New Mexico mountains, and it's, we're broken down on the side of the road. Like, what do we do? And you're problem solving, and you're doing all this stuff as an 18-year-old. It's so like liberating, and you just feel like so independent. And then you get home or you do that for a year, and the novelty wears off so quick. Like then it gets to the point where like going out on tour is a pain in the butt, but you got to do it to support your album. You got to do it because that's where the money is to be made, to pay your bills, all that stuff. I hated it. And even now as an adult, I still feel like I want to get back with the Insiders. We've talked about doing stuff this fall and playing shows locally here in Detroit. And the idea of just getting up to be creative and to let those juices kind of flow again, that's fun to me. But then, like, people on Facebook will say, like, oh, well, will you come to Florida? Will you come play here? Will you come do that? And that terrifies the daylights out of me. Like, at 40, I don't want to get into a van with 5 other guys and drive to Florida. I don't want to do it.
That's a lot of pee stops.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I don't want to do that anymore. And if people want to enjoy my music, and if we do put out anything, and I keep wrestling for the last decade, I've wanted to do a solo project, just like me and an acoustic guitar. And then that's kind of evolved maybe into me, guitar, a little bit of bass, a little bit of drums, but just something chill and just more acoustic. I've kicked that idea around for a while, and I would love to do that. That's on my bucket list, to just do an album of just stuff that I wanted to do. The last album, The Sinner's Songbook, spawned from that, as I had done a bunch of songs for an album that I was going to do on my own, and the guys heard it, some of the guys in the band heard it, and we were like, you know what, let's actually see if we could turn this into an Insiders album, and that became The Sinner's Songbook, that our last album. So I would still like to do that. But other than that, like the whole rock star thing, in no way, shape, or form, let me say, first off, do I believe I was a rock star at all. It's just non-existent. But it's fun. We had a lot of fun. We got to play to some great crowds. We got to meet a bunch of people that I never would have met on my own. Got to see places. I've been to Europe, multiple times, and had a ton of fun that I would never have gotten to do. So I love all that, but I love my current job. And my guys at my current job, ask me if I miss it or if I'd go back, or they'd be like, "Dude, I'd leave this job in a heartbeat to be, to be in a band." Not me. I love what I'm doing now. I've hit the jackpot.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you in a minute about what we're doing now, but I do want to go back to that idea. Money changes it.
Yeah,
like
it does.
when you're doing what you love, and it has to also like make your living. like some of the romance goes out of that. Like, because I was not the same way, but I grew up, wanting to write. Like, that was what I wanted ever since I was in 5th grade. I would sit there with friends and we'd write 90-page stories about us fighting ninjas or whatever in the church balcony. And so I just always knew, like, writing was going to be the future. That was my outlet. And so I took journalism in college or in high school and realized I had social anxiety and didn't want to talk to anyone, which when you're a journalist, that's not the best way to handle it. So I would sit in the back of the class and write movie reviews. And so I kind of always had this dream, like, I wanted to write movie reviews. But going back to this also idea of I wanted to kick myself in the butt, I was in the class for 3 years. Only guy in a class of 10 girls. I never talked to any of them. I was a nerd.
Nice.
Yeah. I did not like that.
Real ladies, man.
Yeah, I was. I was like the quiet guy. Well, what are you doing, Chris? What are you doing this weekend? Well, I might go see Broken Arrow, and then I will write my review.
They're like, you want to come over to our house tonight and sit on our bed with us, and we can think about this class project? And you're like, no, the new Ninja Turtles comes out.
It's not as good as the old stuff. It's not as good as a comic book.
Right, exactly. The comic book's darker. The comic book's way darker. And they're just like, okay.
I have to go apply some Clarisil now. So from there I wanted to always write. Like, it was just kind of my outlet. And I thought, maybe I'll write a novel or a screenplay one day. And, after college, I went to college for journalism. And then after I got out, I was working at the call center, which was terrible and soul-crushing. But I would pull up a blog. I started do you remember Zanga?
Yeah.
I had a Zanga that I kept, no kidding, for 10 years.
Seriously?
Yeah, and I would write in that sucker 3 times a day.
Is Zanga still a thing?
Zanga is done.
Is it really?
Yes, I moved it to a private WordPress account a while ago.
Really?
Just so I would have it. But then I go back and read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I should never read this. Because it wasn't just, oh, here's a movie review. It was, this girl dumped me and I am mad. And it was bad. But it kind of allowed me to hone my voice a little bit. And I realized, I'm pretty good at writing. I can do this. And so then I got fired from Verizon because I just stopped going on time.
Because you had Sprint.
I switched over to Sprint, but then they wouldn't hire me. No, I burned out. I had some medical issues, and it was one of those things you just wake up and you're like, this is what I'm doing with my life. Yeah. And I lost all interest in going to work, and I would go in late, and they finally, it was weird. I got written up for tardies, and they're like, okay, but you know what? In 3 months, this drops off and you'll start over. To the day, 3 months after that, snowstorm, 15 minutes late getting in the door, and they fired me. And all I remember thinking as they're telling me, we got to let you go, I'm thinking, I don't got to come in tomorrow. This is pretty... Because they were going to give me, I still had a bonus they owed me because I was, a top, renewer in the company. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to get that. I'm going to get payout for my my vacation time. And I was out of work for, 4 months, but I was not doing that. So then I got my job in journalism, which to me was kind of like my rock star job. It was what I'd want to do my whole life because I'm writing for a living. And it was so much fun. You had freedom to do whatever you wanted, cover whatever you wanted, as long as it was in your zones. So I would go to city council meetings, I would talk to politicians, I would go to school board meetings, I would interview people who were, writing books or doing, great things in the community. I started doing movie reviews and got paid for that. I got to go out and interview movie directors and stuff like that. Danny Boyle was in town and stuff. The Juno people were in town. But there was always that idea that I'm doing it for money and not a lot. Journalism, I think my journalism job paid me $11 an hour. Ooh. And I'm 25 years old at this point. And that just took so much of the fun out of it. Because I'm like, okay, I've got to write these stories. I love doing this. But this thing I love, I don't know how I'm paying rent.
Yeah.
And I had to have 2 jobs. I worked at a family Christian store for 3 years while I was at the newspaper. And it was fun. I would still to this day consider it the best job I ever had. Because that's what you dream of as a writer is, every week I go in and I'm putting my name on paper. It's coming out with my name on it. And that's the dream. That's what you want. I got dates out of it. Not with good girls. But it was a weird date where she talked about her job as a coroner for a long time.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was the one date I've ever left after like 15 minutes. I'm like, I gotta go. My sister's home for the weekend, and I gotta go see her.
Oh my word.
Yeah, it was bad. But no, it was fun. I got to fly a plane for a story.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was great fun. But yeah, you're looking at it and the money, like just that stress. Like, okay, well, I should probably look for a better paper. But journalism's cratering at that point because we have social media. And do I want to keep doing this? Do I ever want to have a family? So I eventually, I had to get out, and I miss it terribly, but I also think it was like a young person's career. Like, I could not go to meetings like that anymore or work on deadlines like that. Was it hard when you transitioned from music? Like, when you got out of the Insiders, when you woke up after the last show or whatever, was there ever a kind of, oh, that's over, this is hard?
No, I was so sick of it. Like,
Okay.
I was sick of the Insiders by the end of it. Our last tour, I just wasn't having fun. Like,
Okay.
you know, guys in the band had left, and certain guys in the band, not guys, a certain guy in the band, I couldn't deal with. And so I was sick of it at that point. It had become, you know, what started us as 17, 18-year-olds just wanting to play ska. And then, again, you can hear all this in that interview from your other podcast, or the earlier podcast on this one. You know, what it started was just a fun thing of friends. And then, you know, you grow up and you get families, and you have to start making judgment calls on, like, well, I have a house payment to make, and I have this and I have that. And you know, you just grow up and you grow apart from some of the guys in the band, and you have what, you know, in the industry they would call it creative differences and things like that. And it just got to be where it was a business. I was no longer a kid, just a punk kid in a band that, you know, you're just playing for anybody. It was like, oh, we have to have, you know, if we have to sell X amount of tickets, or you know, it's not worth going to that, so cancel that show, like whatever. So it just wasn't fun anymore at all. So when we played that last show, I forget where our last show was that we played, but look, when we finished it, it was like the ride home wasn't like all like sad or whatever. I mean, it was like, okay, guys, I'll see you, you know, and it was like, you know, stay in touch on, I don't know if, well, Facebook wasn't going at that point. But, you know, it was like, you know, we'll stay in touch through whatever, you know, text and blah, blah, blah. And I was ready. And I believe, if I remember right, it was like when we ended, I had already had my next job lined up.
Okay, that was the youth pastor?
Yeah,
okay.
Which was at the Salvation Army, working for the Salvation Army. And so it was like I had like maybe 2 weeks or maybe like a week or something like that. And I stepped into that new position, which was like a trial position from like November through, I believe, like February or March. Okay. And then at that point, I became like the full-fledged, you know, youth director and community center director. And so doing that, I got into that, and I'm like, I love this. This is where I need to be. And then, and then from there, you know, life went on as well.
Yeah, I don't feel like I felt like the crunch, like I'm just doing this to pay the bills, until I got out of journalism. Because there was always the struggle with, am I going to meet my bills? But I was always like, I love this job. I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in journalism. I am lucky to get to do this job. But I ended up having to eventually move into marketing, and I took a job as a like marketing writer with the Army. They have a tank and research plant out in Warren, and so I worked with a contractor. We'd make magazines for them and write newsletters about what was going on, and the hope would be it would cross like a politician's desk. They would fund this program, and that was like it was double what I was making at the paper. So it was good pay, and within like a year it was triple what I was making at the paper.
Oh wow!
So that was nice, because at that point I had an apartment in Rochester, so I was able to pay that. I had met my wife, so we were dating. I was able to take her out on dates, so that was nice. But it was soul-sucking. Like, you go in and you're like, okay, they're giving me money to do something I hate. Like, it was very much like a very intense atmosphere where it's all these politicians and people moving up the ladder, like jockeying for position.
Uh-huh.
So they're screaming at people. Everyone had like a power trip that was kind of crazy. And you just, like, I would get nervous going in. I would get anxiety prone. I remember one day driving into work and like thinking, if I got in an accident, I wouldn't have to go to work today. And like that was probably the time I should have started looking for a job. But I did it for about 4 years, and it got better. Like, there are some really good things I got to do there. They would do all these conferences, and we'd do all the materials for those. One day they did an engineering conference in Detroit. Arnold Schwarzenegger came because he was governor at that point. So my job was to like follow him around at a distance and see if he was ever going to come to our booth. So I got to basically follow Arnold Schwarzenegger around. I didn't get to meet him, but it still felt like it felt like selling out. Like, that's the thing. Like, if you were doing anything creative, the one thing you don't want to do is sell out. And I'm like, oh, I'm writing, but this thing that's always been passionate, now it's in service of writing about engineering and science, and I don't like this. So it was like a hard transition. I still do a lot of the same stuff at my job. Now I work for a university, but I actually I believe in what the university does, and I've benefited from them. So I like doing that. I actually have a good job now. How long were you a youth pastor?
I worked for the Salvation Army for 13 years.
Okay.
And it was definitely a roller coaster. The Salvation Army for me was, there are some people that can handle, in churches, there's still a business, right? Mm-hmm. So there's your Sunday service where you get up and you listen to your pastor, but then there's day-to-day things that go on within a church. And then in the Salvation Army, even more so, because there's a social service end of it, there's a community center end of it. So for me, the Salvation Army being a nonprofit was always like, there's just always a stress of like, we got to find the money for this. We got to find the money for that. And as most of you know, the Salvation Army with their Red Kettle program, in the winter, the kettles outside of the stores, I ran that program for our geographic area for these 13 years. And it's just like the amount of pressure that it's like,
you gotta ask people to stand out there in the cold.
Yeah, so like you're responsible for getting these people, and if their buckets come in and their buckets are shy, and your bosses basically come to you, and I mean this sucks if people are listening that are Salvation Army people and stuff like that, that don't know what goes on behind the curtain, but your bosses come to you and they have a goal. And they're like, hey, this year we need to make this much amount on kettles. And so you're like, okay, well, I'm not the one putting the money in. So all I'm trying to do is work my butt off to get the kettles out to the stores, to get people, volunteers on those kettles, to make sure that there's somebody there so people can put money in the bucket. And so you work your butt off and to get people out there, and then they come in at the end of the night and they're like, well, I got cold, so I went in and did this, or I stepped away from this, and and you're just like, oh my gosh, and every day you're looking at those totals and you're not hitting your numbers, and it's so frustrating. And unfortunately, the position I was in was me. The buck stopped with me, and so my bosses above me, there was no. Over the years, there were some that were willing to help me, and then I had other bosses that weren't willing to help me. And so, it's a pretty big thing when you're a 21, 22-year-old, 23-year-old guy starting a family, and you literally have to be at work at 8:30 in the morning, and you're at work until 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, and you have to be back there at 8 in the morning, and your wife is pregnant or you just had a baby. It's a huge thing, and it just got to the point where when I first took over that job, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then it's a job that is absolutely cyclical. And so you just knew in the fall, it was fall programming, and it was basketball leagues, and it was all this stuff. Into winter, kettles. Into spring, back to programming and recreation leagues, and then summer was was camp and summer day camp, and then it just started over.
Yeah.
And so everything, it was just the same things over and over and over, and I got so burned out on it. And I went through like a lot of things where being the youth director, where I eventually quit being the youth director, and I was only the community center director. And it just burned me out. It just absolutely burned me out. Like I said, there's people who can deal with knowing what goes on behind the curtain at their church, and there's people who can't. I could deal with, there's all this nonsense going on behind the scenes, and then on Sunday morning I have to listen to that guy or that girl give the sermon, knowing the issues that we had throughout the week. I could deal with that. That wasn't an issue for me. The other was just the stress put on me and the money and having to make more money. And I'd see like the goal of like, well, last year we had to raise this much on kettles. This year we have to raise this much on kettles. But yet I never made any more money, and you don't work for a nonprofit to get rich or to make money, but
supporting your family.
And you want to kind of be compensated. So, you're looking at it and you're like, well, I'm up here, and again, from, Thanksgiving to, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, I'm putting in 80 hours a week at work sometimes, and you're not being compensated like $1 any, so that got to be real old, real quick. It burned me out. My faith suffered from it. I went through some dark days with my faith, not in the sense that like, I was like, there is no God, but just dark days where I was like, Lord, I don't know what is going on here, and I can't get up and do one more day of this.
Yeah.
And that was my job that I hated getting up every day. Because I was my own boss, if I wanted to get up and go in at 11 and leave at 2, I could. And I started justifying that because I was salary. Because in the winter I would work 80 hours a week.
In the summer you'd work 2.
Exactly. In the summer I'd come in a half hour before lunch, do what I need to do, take my lunch, and then leave by 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
I've known a lot of people who've been in the ministry, and I, like, pretty much to a T, all of them have ended up leaving. It just burns them out.
Yeah.
Like, I think, like you said, there's so much of a time commitment. There's not a lot of pay in it unless you're like Joel Osteen or something.
Yeah.
But also, I just like the stress of it. I also think having to live in a fishbowl, because if you are in a ministry at a church, people are watching you, especially if they're paying your salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then just understanding that, these people who I'm supposed to be serving, they're just as messed up as I am.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that, but it's my job to do something with that.
Yeah.
My wife was asking me a while ago, she's like, did you ever think about becoming a pastor or a missionary? And like, without hesitation, I'm like, nope.
Right.
I'm like, nope.
Right.
That was never a thing for me.
Right. It is crazy because like as the youth pastor, like I'd get blamed for when like, a kid at school did something stupid. The kid who only came to youth group, once every 3 months would get into trouble at school, and it was, well, why didn't we do
Why didn't
more?
you protect him?
Yeah, and it's like, well,
guide him
you're only
more.
bringing him once every 3 months and sending him here. So when he's out smoking weed and gets busted smoking weed, it's not my fault. Or what is being talked about here at church, you're not backing up at home.
Yeah.
You're not showing, you're sending your kid, but it's, do as I say, not as I do. And then again, there were some dark days, and my faith was challenged in my everyday, was there were some dark days, and within that, I believe, like, I am divorced, and I know without a shadow of a doubt, my marriage started on the downward spiral in my last few years working at the Salvation Army, just because of stress and because of rebellion and all sorts of things like that with my job. So it was just, Salvation Army was a great thing that I started off with doing, and then by my last 3-4 years, I probably shouldn't have been in that position.
Yeah, it is weird too how jobs, like, we always think of it as like Christians, my job is my thing I go to. But there is so much that it challenges your faith having a job. Because what about when the money's not coming in? Yeah. Or like my wife, when we learned she was pregnant, she was working at Blue Cross, like doing marketing work for them, and she wasn't getting benefits because she was a contractor. And she was going in, and we're doing the math. We're like, okay, when you have the baby, what's it going to cost for you to put both kids in daycare? And we're like, oh, it's basically going to be your salary.
Yeah.
So like, okay, maybe the best thing you do is you come home and work freelance from home, get a bunch of clients, and so she did that, and it's turned into like, for her, she's done really well. Like she gets a lot of clients. But there's this, freelance is feast or famine.
Uh-huh.
So there were times, especially that first year, where we weren't used to this, where we'd be sitting there for a month, and I would wake up every day like sweating, like, okay, we have this much in the bank. We are waiting for your checks to come in. Your clients aren't paying you right now. They're not giving you work for like coming down the road. What are we going to do? How are we going to pay mortgage? And like you start just like it put strain. Like we were fighting a lot through that, and then I remember just. You'd pray, God, help a check show up today.
Yeah.
It doesn't show up.
Right.
And it was like over time I had to learn. It's like, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Joel Osteen.
Yeah,
I prayed for the check to show up and it didn't.
Did I ever tell you, when I was a journalist, I interviewed Joel Osteen.
Did you really?
I did. Him and his wife came to Utica, where I covered, and they were doing like a book signing before they went to like the palace to do some sort of rally. So I got a press release like, do you want to interview Victoria Osteen? I'm like, you bet I do. And so I went over to a Borders, and they're like, well, would you like to talk to Joel as well? He is here as well. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to talk to him. So I go, and they do this book signing, and no kidding, they walk in flanked by 4 security guards, walk up to this table, do a little signing, smile, like the creepiest thing is either their smiles were so big and their eyes were so dead, or the fact that they look like siblings. Like they look like twins. And that was really creepy. So then I talked to his wife, and she's all, well, I wrote this book because my husband wrote a book, and I thought maybe I should write a book. And I'm like, that's great. And then he comes over, and I'm just like, I'm in my Calvinist
You're
stage.
like, can I touch your hair?
Yeah. Oh my, you could not touch. You would get cut if you touched his hair. It was sharp. He smelled fantastic too. He smelled so good. But I remember he comes over, and I'm like, I'm gonna just ask him what he believes, because I was in like my Calvinist stage, and I'm like, well, how are you doing? Well, I'm great. I'm so proud of my wife. I'm just so proud. She did this book. I didn't know she had it in her. She could write a book. I'm like, okay. Well, why are you here? Well, things are tough right now. We just want to give our message to the world. Like, what's your message? Things are tough, and they're gonna get better. I'm like, is there more? He just like smiles, like this big smile, like how like when a snake like opens its jaw, like that's what I kept seeing. And then he's like, well, I need to go to the bathroom now. And he walked to the bathroom with like 3 bodyguards flanking him. It was crazy. But that was a digression. But yeah, like work definitely I think is like it's a stressor that sanctifies. Now you are not at Salvation Army anymore. You're a cop, right?
I am.
And was that something you always wanted to do? Because you
Always.
once sang you did not want to be a cop.
I did. I once sang, and it was projecting. I can honestly say that, when I'm going through and when I was writing that song and thinking of different things to do or different professions at that time, the reason that came out was because that's in the forefront of my mind. Like, this is what I want to do. So I'm like, well, I don't ever want to do this, because that's like the first profession that I wanted to get down to maybe make like a little crack on. But, yeah, so I did the Salvation Army, and I just, from dealing with kids and stuff, and towards the end there, when I was just unhappy with what I was doing, I always wanted to be a police officer. Like, my mom last year found something from, like, kindergarten, where it was like, when I grow up, I want to be, get this, a garbage man or a police officer. And so it's just something all growing up. I've just always kind of felt it. I've always been drawn to like military. I never went into the military. I wish I would have. Mm-hmm. Well, you look back, and I love my life. I love that I graduated and went into the Insiders. I love that, I learned what I learned with the Salvation Army. So there probably wasn't room there for military, or I'd be a different person, obviously. But I've always liked that. I've always wanted to be a cop. And so I was finally able to, I had started looking while I was working at the Salvation Army. And so when I left the Salvation Army, it was because I was starting academy. Mm-hmm. And so I started as a Detroit police officer, and everything that you fantasize about being a police officer is what happens in the day-to-day in Detroit. So being a Detroit police officer, it's exactly like it's a movie.
Okay.
So I've been able to, I've always been somebody who's curious about what goes on the other side of that yellow crime scene tape.
Yeah.
And, I love the true crime shows and all that stuff. And so to be able to step over that and go, into a murder scene, to do all that stuff. I know it might sound creepy and that might not be some people's bag, and they might say, well, that's morbid and that's weird. It doesn't seem weird to me. Like what I always tell people on my back, I have a big angel on my back, and it's not that I think it's my guardian angel. I think that I'm the angel in the sense that I put myself in situations so you don't have to.
Right, yeah.
And that's what I've always felt growing up. Like, if a friend of mine was getting bullied, I'm a big guy. I was always one of the biggest guys. And my dad told me as a child, your dad, God gave you a big body, use it, and kind of the whole use it for good. And so, if a friend of mine was getting bullied growing up, I would bully the bully. I would make sure that he stopped messing with my friend. And so that's just kind of carried on through life in all that stuff. So becoming a police officer, you're able to do what you see in movies. So I've been able to be a part of crime scenes, murder scenes, shootings, all sorts of stuff on that horrific end of the spectrum. People jumping off buildings and, crazy stuff that you would flip if I told you, or you could see the pictures that were inside my head, all the way to the other side where you're laughing, you're crying with people, and just at the joys in life and things of that nature. And so in Detroit, being a Detroit cop, that's my alma mater. I went to college, I went to a university, but I don't consider myself an alumni of those universities, because it's I kind of got some credits here, I kind of got some credits there, but I consider myself Detroit Police Department alumni. That was my college years, that was my growing up, and my education came down there, and so I met some great people and lost some great people and things like that. And like I said, the experiences would blow your freaking mind, if we were sitting here with a few beers and we were just, candid stories and all that stuff. The stuff I could tell you would blow your mind. So it's great, and I love that I was able to do that stuff. Now I moved to a suburb of Detroit, and it's different, but it's still an honorable, I lay my head on my pillow every day, and I know I did right that day.
Yeah.
Whether it was helping someone. We don't have the crazy violent crime in this, in the city that they have in Detroit that I was a part of, but there's still a whole lot of nastiness that goes on, and a whole lot of death and accidents and all that stuff that you're a part of, and obviously the drug epidemic, and people that are listening here, heroin is an epidemic of epic proportions right now in this country, and fentanyl and all these things. And kids start by sneaking their parents' Vicodins, and I don't think anybody that I've met, I always ask people who are addicts how they started. And not one kid is well, some girl or some dude offered me heroin at a party. Nobody ever says that. Everybody was, I used to take pills from my dad has a bad back. And so I would, take his Vicodin. And well, then they just think that they're having fun taking Vicodin. They don't realize that their body is building up a need for opiates. Yeah. And then I talked to these kids who were doing, 30 Vicodin a day, and street value of a pill is anywhere from $3 to $10. So if you need 30 of them a day to get through, you're stealing money.
Yeah.
You're going through your savings. You're stealing money from your parents. You're starting to break into cars to get things, to just be able to trade and barter and pawn things. And then you get to the point where you are so hooked on opiates that's when somebody at a party, or somebody that or your dealer says, hey, instead of spending $300 a day on Vicodin, here's a $15 bundle of heroin, and that's your opiate, and then it's done. It's done at that point. And I've seen kids I've seen a girl who was in as of today, I've had 4 kids that I've known since at least the age of 6, OD, that I had to show up at their, the 911 call came out and I've had to, go and deal with that. And, you're looking at the parents and they remember you as the youth director and, running their basketball league and their kids were in that, and you're doing chest compressions and things like that. And it just doesn't work out. And sometimes it does work out. I had a kid on one, a few months ago. He OD'd, no heartbeat, no nothing. And they Narcaned him. And Narcan is that miracle drug that blocks the your receptors or whatever to the heroin, and it's basically like in short, it's like the movie Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I was just thinking Pulp Fiction.
And so that's what they do, and this kid is out, he's not breathing, and his buddy who was doing heroin with him is going crazy, and they Narcan him, and boom, the first thing he does is open his eyes and go, "Joe Yerke?"
Oh my god!
The first thing he says, "Joe Yerke?" And I'm like, "What are you doing?" Like, I start lighting into this kid. "What are you doing on this crap?" And blah, 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 blah. And I'm tearing him up and everything and like that. And he's like, "Dude, what are you doing here?" Like, and I'm like, you were dead, wow, dude. You were dead. And he's like, "What?" And so, like, I've had to, like, deal with this stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm dealing with now in my department is, kind of this epidemic. And then, you always have your car crashes and you have your things like that. And you're dealing with people on their worst days. But then you get the really fun stuff and, the times where you can laugh and you have your good times with the public, and especially now, like, when it's a very tense time with law enforcement. And there's a lot of people out there that don't like police officers, and you have those little interactions with people that if you judged a book by its cover, you would probably say they were in that corner of not liking police officers. Yeah. And they would probably look at me and say, "This is probably your stereotypical, he's bald, he's white, he's huge, he's the enemy." And, over the past few months, I've had some really good, breaking down walls and building bridges with a lot of the community and stuff. Awesome. Over stuff that's happened. So it's great. And I love my job. And to me, I don't wake up and go to work every day like, I'm going to work. To me, and this is the God's honest truth, like, I get up and I go to work and I have a ton of fun from 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. And do I get tired and I want to go home and eat and come home with my family and stuff like that? Absolutely I do. But while I'm at work, it's not work. It is a ton of fun, and every 2 weeks I get a paycheck.
It's the dream. I always remember when I was a reporter, you always wanted to do police stories. Like, they were, like, the highlight was on Mondays, you would go to the police station, check through their crime logs for the weekend because there was always something that had happened. They were always, joker. They're always the nicest people. Yeah. Like, and they love talking with the press. They always wanted to see if any of us would volunteer to be tased for a story. Right. It was fun. I'm glad to hear you can, like, mend those bridges too, because I think, it is a really tense time, and I think it's just a really weird time where people need to kind of realize, I don't know, see people as human more. Yeah. Like, I'm glad to hear you're doing that. Journalism, we had that, but it wasn't, the life and death stakes. It was, we're the scumbag press who's lying to everyone. But,
fake news.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. People didn't like news reporters all the time, but, they seem to like marketers, because that's my job now. But no, it's like, I got to the point where I didn't worry about selling out anymore either, which was nice. Yeah. Like, when you have kids and they have to go to daycare, selling out's a good idea. Right. Yeah. But I'm like, you know what? I have a job right now that I go to that I work 40 hours a week. I believe in what I'm writing about. It might get old. It might get repetitive sometimes. But I believe, like, I work for a university that I graduated from. I know they're doing good work. They're in a city that's growing. I get good benefits. I get a lot of time off. Get a lot of sick days. They're flexible. If I have to work from home, I work from home one day. And you just kind of see, like, okay, well, that's the job, and I do that 8 hours a day, and that funds everything else. Like, do you still get, like, the creative? You said you wanted to maybe do a album, like a solo album down the road.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you, like, scratch that creative itch still? Because I imagine it doesn't turn off.
I mean, I'm going to be dead honest with our listeners, and I hope our, Insiders fans, come and listen to the podcast. But to tell you the truth, I'm for years now, I've had zero. Like, I have the largest case of writer's block.
Really?
I think of what inspires me is like movies.
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot in life inspires me to write. Like, I can deal with situations at work and I'm not like, this would be a great song. What inspires me is like, I'll catch a movie. I think we talk about Fury. Yeah. And so like, I'll see something in Fury and I'll be like, oh my gosh. And everything will start running through my head. And I'm like, oh, this. And I'll grab my guitar and I'll be like, ding, 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 ding. And I'll think of it. And then I'll actually grab a pen and paper to start writing lyrics. And everything that I was just thinking is gone.
Oh, gosh.
And I cannot write to save my life. I cannot write to save my life. And I don't know if it's because the Lord is like, it's not your time to be writing right now. Like, it's not your time right now. Right now, I need you doing your job over here, and I don't need you being distracted by, trying to make an album and stuff like that. Let's concentrate on your job. Let's concentrate on your family. And when that creativity or that muse is finally there and I can do it, so be it. But right now, just God's honest truth, I couldn't write a nursery rhyme right now.
Wow.
Yeah, I got nothing in me. I got absolutely nothing in me.
Wow.
So it's one of those things that, like, when I think about like getting out with the Insiders and playing again, I think, obviously we'd be doing all like old stuff, and I'd love to do covers, of favorite bands and stuff like that. Because there's just nothing that I feel. There's a million things inside of me that I want to say, and then as soon as I go to do it, it's like there's just a brick wall between my brain, my heart, and my hands. And I can't write it. I can't type it. Nothing comes out.
Maybe that's part of like, because they always say like art comes out of like unhappiness and stuff. But if you're like in a good place, maybe the art just doesn't need to flow.
Yeah. And the things that like I have written over the years, I mean, I went through a horrible divorce. And so there was plenty I wanted to write there. But then once you write it, you're like, does this need to be said? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to bash, people. I don't want to, there's a difference between like telling a story and just airing dirty laundry. So I'm not going to basically write a tell-all album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you write all these songs and you're like, oh my gosh, I could say this and this, and people would rally around this, and the men all over the country would be singing this song like an anthem. And then it's like, but nothing good would come from it. Like, I'm writing from a place of sin and anger and woe is me and all this stuff. And I don't think I'm there anymore. I think I've gone through a lot of garbage, and I think I've gone through, I think I went through a time of depression, and I went through all that stuff, and I'm out of it. I have a girlfriend and that I absolutely think is the bee's knees, and her daughter makes me laugh so much, and my kids enjoy being with them, and my family enjoys her, and her family enjoys me, I believe, and we have a great time in our we both like college football. For years I was married into a family where none of the women enjoyed sports. Like, the men would go watch sports, and then the women would all sit and tell their stories. And my girlfriend now, Molly, she loves college football, which is, one of my faves. And so it's like, on Saturday, where are we going to be? What games are we watching? What's that? We enjoy wine. We enjoy going to wine tastings. We enjoy these things. We enjoy being stupid and just like opening a bottle and being like, what do you smell? Well, I smell blackberry. What do you smell? And I'm like, I smell wine. Like, I can't tell the difference. I smell red wine. That's what I smell. And so, like I said, I love my job. I went through my, midlife crisis and bought my record player. So I love my vinyl collection right now, and so I'm just in like a really good place. And like you said, if creativity comes out of a place of questioning, or a place of, questioning the answers, raging against the machine, whatever that is, I'm not there.
Yeah, it's funny. When I met my wife, I realized my blogging dried up all of a sudden. Like, I used to write 2 or 3 times a day in my Zanga. And, like,
awesome.
there would be long posts, and they'd be like, sometimes it'd be theological stuff. And I'm like, what's going on? I met my wife or girlfriend at that point, and I'm like, why can't I write anything? I'm like, oh, I wrote to meet girls. but yeah, like, my type of writing has changed. Like, unless it's something that I'm really passionate about, my writing is so analytical now. Like, I don't write a lot of emotional stuff like I used to. Like, I write movie reviews, which are very analytical.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I blog about faith and stuff. But it's very rare that I write anything angry because I'm just like it's just getting older. I'm like, not everything needs to be said.
Right.
And I'm just finding like, oh, well, if I want to have that creative itch, I love movies. I don't have to write something that's going to piss people off. I can write about movies, and people like movies.
Right.
And I have a little side hustle doing that. I find that the journalistic itch gets scratched by doing like this podcast and interviewing people or just getting our thoughts out here. Like, I find that very fulfilling and fun.
I do too. Yeah.
And then, like, I've been very blessed, like, in addition to writing about, marketing and universities, which can get dull. I do have, I have a blog on Patheos where I write movie reviews. I just started a month ago writing twice a month for Grosse Pointe News, doing movie reviews for them. And I'm constantly looking for new outlets. I'm like, oh, you know what? It's fun when my life doesn't depend on it.
Yeah.
Like down the road, I'm getting my master's. I'd like to move somewhere down the road where I'm doing, movie writing or some sort of writing for a living. But right now, it's nice to just be like, oh, yeah, this is a few extra bucks each month. And
yeah.
My name gets out there, but I don't have to depend on this, so it can still be fun.
Yeah.
So.
And with that, I think my job now, what I love so much is at the Salvation Army, again, I always felt like the pressure was me. Mm-hmm. I had to come up with the next program. I had to come up with the next big thing. I had to come up with this. In the Insiders, like, I got to be writing the next, song. You interviewed Steve Taylor, and I doubt you guys talked about this, but when we were on Steve's label and we were writing one of our albums, like, nobody I had ever worked with, no label ever wanted me to like submit lyrics and want to go over them. But like Steve, obviously being a writer, Steve Taylor would be like, send me your lyrics. And he'd be like, not good enough. I'm like, what do you mean not good enough? These are my lyrics. And he's like, they're not good enough. You can do better than this. Like, he was like a high school English teacher.
I can see that from him.
And I'm like, dude, Steve, but this is what I want to say. He's like, no, this line here, blah, 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 blah. He'd be like, he's like, what are you really trying to say there? And I'd be like, well, I'm trying to say this. He's like, so say that. And, so he would push me to do better and better. But here's the thing. Being a 21-year-old kid, didn't appreciate it. And I'd walk away like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm keeping them the way they are. And guess what? I'm a police officer now, and he's a platinum selling artist.
You know what he does right now? He is a professor.
Oh, is he? Yeah,
exactly. He's a film professor.
But like, with all of that, like, where everything was always on me to write the next song, to find the next program. With being a police officer, all I do is carry out. It's paramilitary, so whatever a sergeant tells me to do, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I can't, obviously it comes to problem solving. There's certain things within my job where obviously I can do and act for my own. But in your day-to-day stuff, if they're like, Joe, today you're doing, you're in beat 3, then I go to beat 3. If there's a 5K run at the south end of the city and I'm not assigned to that, out of sight, I have nothing to do with that. Whereas when I was at the Salvation Army, every program that was going, I had to be a part of. I had to know what was going on. I had to know what supplies needed to go where, this, that, the other thing. It was all me. With being a police officer, the rules are simple. They're laws. They're laws and ordinances. You break them. We're there to enforce those, to either call your attention to it. Hey, you know what? You were speeding here. This is only 30. Yeah. You were doing 55. You got to slow it down. You either warn them or you give them a ticket. You know what I mean? And then when it gets into the bigger things, you might get arrested. You might not. But nothing falls on me. Like, I'm not telling you can't do that. The state of Michigan is telling you you can't do that. Yeah, just enforcing it. Exactly. So, like, there's not a whole lot of, like, thinking, when it comes to those types of things that I've loved, that I've hated my whole life and I love now, because it's like, hey, this is the way it is. Like, if you choose to shoplift, if you choose to steal 2 cases of Bud Light and a case of Red Bull, and just walk past all the registers, throw it in your car and think you're going to book when you're on every camera in the store, and now I show up and you're like, uh-oh. Like it's a no-brainer. So like my job is, I love it that I can just kind of go and do my job, and then there are times where, you can, I think we've all seen it on the news or something, this is an example. I've never done this, but a police officer who drives by a group of kids who are playing basketball, and you get out and you shoot some hoops with the kids while you're in uniform, you play a little one-on-one, like those types of things. We have those moments where we can do those types of things with the community and have a little bit of fun, and it's just it's stress just off my shoulders. Yeah. Like being a police officer is less stressful than working for the Salvation Army. That's like how I feel, which is nuts.
I can see that. No, I could definitely see that. Yeah, because I find that at my job, I'm not trying to fill a story list with 10 stories anymore. I am simply taking something someone gives me for the most part and making sure, are all your commas in place? Could this be said better? Could it, that's my job. It's nice to not have that on me. But speaking of work, tomorrow's a work day for me. It's your day off.
Yeah,
right?
You got to get out of here.
Yeah, so we probably got to close on up. But another fun episode. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. Tell us your first jobs. Go to the Facebook page. Tell us your first jobs, favorite jobs, dream jobs, worst jobs. We'd love to hear them. And again, maybe we'll share them on an episode soon.
Cool.
So old episodes are at iTunes. Please give us a rating. Go on over to Patreon. Throw us a few bucks if you want to contribute to the show. We greatly appreciate it.
If we get 5 or 10 more bucks?
5 or 10 more
on
dollars.
A live podcast, I will show my surgery scar.
And you want to see that?
You will.
So follow us on Facebook or Twitter. I will throw it in the show notes, and we will see you in a week.